Have you ever really stopped to think about what makes the people of a nation look the way they do? Today, we're doing a deep dive into Cambodia. It's a place where, every face tells a story, a kind of living history written right there in features, skin, hair. Our sources for this are pretty broad. We've got historical accounts, genetic studies, anthropological data, cultural observations, too. Our mission really is to unpack this intricate tapestry. What makes Cambodia's people so distinct? We want to guide you beyond just one single sort of typical image.
Yeah, what's fascinating when you look at these sources is just how deeply appearance is tied into everything else. We're talking ancient migrations, powerful empires, centuries of trade, even modern social changes. We'll trace that story, the jungles, the rivers, the cultures, everything that shaped the Khmer nations. You can understand not just what Cambodians look like, but really why.
Okay, let's get into it then. Our sources keep pointing out that the Khmer people, and that's almost 97% of Cambodia's, 17 million people? They're not just one single group. They come from Austroasiatic speaking groups. These were some of the earliest people to settle the Mekong region thousands and thousands of years ago. That's the bedrock.
Exactly, the bedrock. And then built on top of that, you have these different waves coming in. Indian merchants, for instance, brought South Asian elements through all that Indian Ocean trade. Then you had Chinese migrants adding East Asian markers and, just constant interaction with neighbors in Southeast Asia. It all adds up, diversifying the gene pool over centuries. A very layered picture.
And we have science backing this up, right? There were some genetic studies in 2017 that are really interesting here. What did they actually find about these different contributions?
Those studies are quite revealing, yeah. They show that Cambodians carry mostly Austroasiatic ancestry, somewhere around 70–80%. But then on top of that, there's a significant chunk, maybe 10–15% of South Asian input, and then a smaller bit, maybe 5–10% East Asian admixture, and that East Asian part. You tend to see it a bit more in the northern parts of the country.
Okay, so if we translate those percentages into what people actually look like, how does that mix play out for you, the listener, if you were observing people there?
Well, that mix is exactly why you might see some Cambodians who perhaps resemble Thais or Vietnamese people.
Yeah.
While others might have features that seem, closer to South Asians. It's the history right there in the genes, a direct reflection of all those interactions and movements.
Right. So what about skin tones then? Our sources talk about this warm spectrum, most people having golden brown to medium brown skin, which makes sense, living under a tropical sun.
It does make sense.
Yeah.
But, like you said, it's a spectrum, and it's not totally uniform across the country. There are definite regional differences. Up in the northern provinces, closer to Laos and Vietnam, you actually find lighter beige tones are a bit more common. But then you go down south to the coastal areas. With all that history of sea trade and, more direct sun, you often see deeper, richer brown shades there.
Okay. And the surveys break this down.
Yeah, roughly. About 65% seem to fall into that medium brown category, maybe 25% lighter golden beige, and around 10% with darker brown complexions.
But it's not just genetics, is it? You mentioned culture. There's a whole cultural conversation around skin tone here, and this is where it gets really fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. There's often an idealization of lighter skin in, say, Cambodian media. And this preference, it has deep roots, centuries of Indian cultural influence, where lighter skin was sometimes associated with higher social standing. And then that got reinforced during the French colonial period, with European beauty standards coming into play.
And that fuels industries.
Exactly. It's led to this huge, booming market for skin lightening creams, often quite unregulated, too.
Wow. That sounds like a really powerful pressure, but is there any pushback? Are things changing at all?
Definitely. The pendulum is swinging back, you could say. There's some really strong grassroots movements happening. And younger Cambodians especially are actively celebrating natural brown tones, embracing this whole brown is beautiful idea.
That sounds positive.
It is. It feels like a really significant shift in national pride, in identity. It's about reclaiming something, challenging those older norms.
Okay, shifting focus a bit. What about eyes? Sources say dark brown is the dominant color, right? Like overwhelmingly so.
Overwhelmingly, yes. Over 95% fall into that dark brown category. But even within that, you get these subtle, interesting variations. Maybe 3–5% of Cambodians might have lighter tones, amber, maybe hazel. And again, you tend to see this a bit more in those northern communities where that East Asian genetic input is slightly higher.
Ah, the genetic links again.
Exactly. It comes down to variations in the pigmentation alleles, the specific genes controlling color. So these lighter eyes are rare, but they tell a story about the diverse genetic threads.
So even with something seemingly uniform like eye color, there's nuance.
Precise.
And hair. The typical description is straight, dark, thick. But I'm guessing there's variation there too.
You guess right. The sources break it down pretty well. About 70% have straight black hair. That's the most common type. But then maybe 20% shows slightly wavy hair. You see that a bit more in the central parts of the country. And then about 10% have hair that's thicker, maybe even a bit frizzier in texture. And sometimes that's linked back to those really ancient Austroasiatic roots.
Interesting. And you might see other colors sometimes.
Occasionally, yes. Natural dark brown shades can pop up, especially if there's mixed ancestry in the family history. And that thickness you mentioned, it's quite notable, often linked to a specific gene variant, the EDAR gene. It's common across East and Southeast Asia and influences hair texture and thickness.
Right, right. Okay, let's talk facial structure. This seems like another area where all those different influences would really show through.
Absolutely. It reflects both that deep Austroasiatic foundation and all the layers added on top. For the Khmer majority, the general picture might be an oval face shape, medium width nose, almond-shaped eyes, that golden brown skin we talked about. But the really compelling part is how different regional signatures emerge when you travel around.
Like how? What are the contrasts?
Well, take northern Cambodians up near Laos and Vietnam. They often tend to have slightly narrower faces, maybe lighter skin on average, straighter noses, features that lean a bit more towards East Asian norms.
Okay. And compared to the South?
In the South, especially coastal areas, you might see more rounder faces, those deeper complexions we mentioned, and often broader noses. It reflects that long history of maritime trade contacts, different influences showing up differently.
And this brings minority groups into the picture too, doesn't it?
It does. A really important point. The Cham minority, for example, they're about 2% of the population. They often have sharper facial features, sometimes lighter skin too. This reflects their distinct history, Malay and Arab ancestry, linked to centuries of Islamic trade networks.
So there's quantifiable difference.
Oh, yes. Anthropological data actually shows significant variation, up to 12% difference in things like nasal width and facial angles across Cambodia's regions, which is quite a lot considering it's mostly one ethnic group, the Khmer.
Fascinating. Now, what about height and build? Sources say Cambodians are generally shorter than global averages?
That's generally true, yes. Today, the average height for men is around 165 centimeters. That's about 5'5". And for women, it's about 154 centimeters, so just over 5 feet.
And are there regional differences here too?
Subtle ones, yeah. Northern Cambodians tend to be slightly taller on average. Men may be closer to 167 centimeters. Southerners, slightly shorter. And these differences are often linked to long-term factors, like historical nutrition patterns and local environmental conditions.
But there's been progress, right? I saw a note about a 2020 health survey.
Yes, that's really encouraging news. The survey noted Cambodians have actually grown taller by about 3 centimeters over the last 40 years or so.
That's significant. What does that tell us?
It speaks volumes, really. It reflects improvements in diet, in healthcare, especially after those very difficult decades of conflict. It shows resilience, progress. It's a positive story.
It really is. Okay, this brings us to a really key point about perception. Many outsiders might have this idea of a single typical Cambodian look, dark eyes, straight black hair, medium skin. But inside Cambodia, people know it's much more complicated than that, right?
Absolutely. That gap between the external stereotype and the internal reality is huge. Someone from the north might look quite similar to someone from Vietnam. Someone from the south might share features with Malays. And the Cham minority, well, they have links to both Arab and Malay appearances. Plus, you go to the cities, like Phnom Penh. Decades of people moving around, intermarrying, it blurs the lines even more. Younger people especially mix traditional Khmer features with, modern global trends. The idea of one look just doesn't hold up.
So how does that complex reality affect things like identity and beauty standards within the country? You mentioned media earlier.
Right, the debate gets sharper there. Light-skinned actors still tend to dominate TV screens, commercials, which means that darker-skinned Cambodians, who are the majority, especially in rural areas, often feel underrepresented, maybe even marginalized.
I can see that.
Activists are quite vocal about this. They argue it excludes the way most people in the nation actually look, and that diminishes visibility, pride. It's an ongoing conversation.
To make this more tangible, our sources suggest imagining a walk, say, along the riverbank in Phnom Penh. You might see a young Khmer woman, golden brown skin, long straight black hair, maybe selling lotus flowers, and right next to her, maybe a Cham shopkeeper. Sharper features, maybe slightly wavy hair, arranging spices. And nearby, an older farmer, perhaps from the south. Darker skin, broader nose, smiling as he sells fruit. Their looks are different.
But each one is completely authentically Cambodian. That picture really captures it, and it makes you think, how do these visible differences connect to deeper feelings in society? For many Cambodians, appearance is deeply tied to heritage, to pride. You hear families tracing roots back to the Angkor Empire, emphasizing that lineage. But we have to acknowledge, prejudice can exist too. Darker skin sometimes carries stigma. Cham minorities might face certain stereotypes. It's complex.
But you said things are changing, especially with younger people.
Yes, and that's the really hopeful part. Young Cambodians are using social media, other platforms, to actively celebrate those features. Sometimes look down upon rural features, darker skin, indigenous beauty. They're reframing them as symbols of authenticity, of strength. It feels like a real shift in national pride, moving towards embracing the diversity, not shying away from it.
So pulling it all together.
Well, the consensus among scientists, historians, everyone who studies this is clear. There is no single Cambodian look. There just isn't. Instead, Cambodia is this incredible blend. Those ancient Austroasiatic roots, yes, but also waves of Indian culture, Chinese trade links, Malay connections, the unique influence of the Cham people. From the lighter-skinned northerner to the darker-skinned southern farmer, from the Cham minority member to cosmopolitan city dweller, every single face is part of the same national story.
And this variety, this range, yes, it can sometimes cause discussion, maybe even tension. But fundamentally, doesn't it also show incredible resilience? These are people who've weathered empires, colonization, devastating war, and now they're finding strength in celebrating the very diversity that makes them who they are. It's history written on faces shaped by rivers, temples, trade, survival.
Exactly. So when you see a Cambodian person, maybe with light golden skin and almond eyes, and then another with dark brown skin and maybe wavy hair, and perhaps another with those distinct sharper Cham features, you're not seeing contradictions. Not at all. You're seeing Cambodia's past and its present woven together in its people, a living, breathing, beautiful mosaic shaped by centuries of dynamic history.
So what makes Cambodia's people look so diverse? As we've heard, it's definitely not one simple answer. It's more like a symphony of influences playing out over thousands of years. It's a story told through genes, through cultural ideas, and through just incredible resilience.
And maybe the biggest takeaway here for you listening is this. Cambodia's real beauty isn't in trying to find one single image. It's in the incredible, stunning diversity of all its faces. Identity isn't about being uniform. It's the sum of all the differences, all the threads that make a nation, any nation, whole. It's really an invitation, isn't it, to see that rich, nuanced tapestry of humanity wherever you look?